I think now is the time to be sort of very ambitious in our demands for those kinds of services, which has been on the agenda for a long time. So just to wind up, I mean, I think we're in a period now where notwithstanding the fact that I would argue almost the entire recovery has been based on these extraordinary interventions to keep the system going. The official discourse now is about exit strategies. It's about returning interest rates to kind of normal settings. It's about moving from large deficits to rebalancing budgets. I mean, I think if that takes place in and of itself with nothing to replace that, that's going to be a disaster. So I think, we have to counterpose to that sort of strategies of economic renewal and transformation. So I'll just close by putting in a plug for, I guess on November the 18th, the CCPA and the CLC were jointly organizing a day-long roundtable around that kind of theme built around the alternative budget process, which may be of interest to folks in terms of exploring some of those alternatives.
Thank you.
A senior economist at QB and also a public intellectual in regards. He is an associate researcher at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, where he's published extensively. One of his more recent contributions being the problem of public-private partnerships. He has also been a commenter on Red Eye Radio Cooperative, where he commented on the federal budget, and a contributor to both Bravo newspaper online and a blogger for the Progressive Economist Forum. So thanks very much for coming today.
Thanks. I've also worked in government, which has given me an interesting perspective on how government works, both for the at Queen's Park for the Ontario Finance Minister, and then as the economist for the Ontario Governor. So that's given me an interesting perspective on how government engages with business and with other people. I just want to say thank you very much. I live less than half a dozen blocks from here, but I don't feel really engaged with Carleton University. There aren't many students around where I live. Justin explained that this is a consequence of the neoliberal growth model because cost of housing is too high, and everybody, because of high cost of tuition, everybody has to work. So all the students have to work. So there isn't. I don't feel much engaged in that way. So I really want to thank you for having this, but also from my work life, I really appreciate more engagement. It's our fault as well with critical thinkers here on campus. I think we really need to strengthen those bonds. I also wanted to apologize. I haven't kept up with a lot of critical analysis in the past little while, so my comments are mostly based on observation. They may sound unschooled or redundant or stupid or something in some cases. I don't know. But they're also from the point of view of somebody trained in economics and a Canadian economist. I haven't traveled or lived elsewhere much, so they're from that perspective. Andrew had a very good explanation of some recent economic history. You're asking, there was some question here about different explanations of the economic crisis. It's interesting to see that some parts of the sort of what I'd say the loony left have said that the crisis was caused by too much government regulation, and particularly the Community Reinvestment Act in the States, which was a requirement for banks to loan to inner city people, usually people of a different color than me. So there's some inherent racism in that, which then led to this housing bust. So a lot of people have got different explanations of this. Harper has unfortunately been able to blame it, and a lot of people believe that, at least in Canada, on the United States and irresponsible rules there. Some people just think it's the cause of financial deregulation and executive compensation, which of course have a role, or misplaced incentives. Almost 2 years ago, the governor of the Bank of Canada, Mark Carney, actually, this is before we were really affected by recession, but he said that one of the causes of it was misplaced incentives. By that he meant executive compensation, which I thought was a pretty startling thing for him to say. But then, of course, he said that we shouldn't regulate it because the market knows best, right? I kind of come back to the writings of Voltaire and Candide. I don't know if any of you have read Candide, but it's a mockery of the idea that we all live in the most perfect of worlds. Everything is for the best in the most perfect of worlds. There was a philosophy that existed at that time through Leibniz, I think it was, and he mocks this Professor Pangloss, who believes that everything is for the best in the most perfect of worlds. And during that time, there was a big earthquake in Lisbon, I think, which led to all these tens of thousands of deaths. And they couldn't understand. This is one of the most Catholic countries that existed at that time. But why did so many people die? And they had some explanations for why, even though God controlled everything, everybody died. Often the market fundamentalists explain the world in this way, right? The market is operating according to our narrow economic philosophy, so everything must be for the best. Everybody gets paid what they produce, the value of what they produce, and we see that coming back again. But clearly, it was a crisis of the capitalist system and of capital. Andrew went through some of the policies there, neoliberal policies, a lot of different names for it. Washington Consensus, both the economic orthodoxy that was put in place in these countries and also forced on other countries throughout the world through the Washington Consensus. What was interesting in this one was, and as Andrew said, there was a shift towards fiscal policy towards an emphasis on monetary policy. What I found fascinating a year ago was all of a sudden the chief economists for the banks got together, they held hands, and they decided that we needed some fiscal stimulus. So they turned their backs on 30 years of emphasis on monetary, just on monetary levers to control the macroeconomic cycles. Some forecasters see this as a classic business cycle that will come out of with a good dose of Keynesian monetary and fiscal stimulus, and all will be okay. I don't buy this because it comes from the same people who failed to see the downturn. Often those forecast models focus on income, and I see this as a crisis not just of capital, but particularly of accumulated capital. There are probably more appropriate terms for this later. Previous recessions since the 1980s were caused fairly intentionally by high interest rates, and those were used to discipline labor. The labor markets were getting tight, and inflation was growing, and governments, but they blatantly did use high interest rates to bring down inflation and also to discipline labor, keep wage rates lower.